The SABC board has rejected a Sunday Times report claiming that the board wants to spy on its staff using the resources of the State Security Agency. The board says the Sunday paper must be held accountable.
We're not going to allow Sunday Times and any other media house to ruin the reputation of this company. All right? We'll take the necessary steps as a board to protect the reputation of the SABC and to hold them accountable. They can't just issue statements and headlines that are misleading. We're not going to accept it.
Director of Media Monitoring Africa, William Bird, says the way the story was framed in the Sunday paper is concerning.
We need to be cautious about suggesting that we believe that the story is necessarily accurate, because to date we've had no indication that there's been any level of editorial interference from the board or in fact senior executive level in the way that the SABC is run. We haven't heard any alleged interference by the minister or people outside of the SABC. You know, those things seem to have been, thankfully.
The board says they need plans to ensure that media leaks do not occur.
We're also working on a plan to implement a system that will make sure that board packs are protected, that they cannot be printed anywhere, they cannot be forwarded. So there is a number of other initiatives that the company is implementing. But of course, we need to explore to get other expert input that can help us come up with new methods and close all the loopholes that may exist.
Unions are yet to respond. Natasha Piri, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, unions are ready to respond. Communications Workers Union spokesperson Aubrey Tshabalala joins me on the line now. Thanks so much for your time on The Full View this evening. What's the CWU's position on the reports by the Sunday Times and the denial by the SABC about spying? Aubrey, a very good evening to you. Let's just get a response from you on that Sunday Times report and the subsequent denial by the SABC about using the State Security Agency to spy on their staff members.
Well, good evening to you and viewers at home. We at first were shocked with the news that state agencies will be used to spy on workers, because obviously that will be going against the Labour Relations Act. That's the first point, but also will give us a worrisome point that institutions such as public broadcasters, state agencies will be used to pursue some other agendas. So we're very objective towards that. But we found comfort with the statement released by SABC to say that they distance themselves. There's no such thing. We further made a call that we meet with the SABC executive tomorrow to discuss this matter further.
Okay, now the SABC has issued a statement saying that it does use the State Security Agency when it comes to issues such as the leaking of confidential information. What's your take on that?
Well, usage of state security agencies in institutions like SOEs are troublesome because in the first instance, you'll find that there is political interference, which is something that we've been standing against, particularly when it comes to broadcasting and journalism. So coming to the state-owned institutions such as SABC, we believe that the running of the institution has been in the dire state. We had questions about the governance of SABC, and once the board starts to have some secret meetings, that also will raise questions. That's why now we have obviously requested to have a meeting with the SABC as Labour, so that we can go into the meeting and probe the main issues that have been raised forward.
Okay, can you give us more insight into what other issues you may be raising with the SABC management when you set to meet with them tomorrow?
Well, the first is that there is this allegation that says in the minutes of SABC, there is an allegation that says SABC will use the state-owned entities, state security agencies to investigate on workers. SABC doesn't come out clearly to say they deny that. It's not true. All what they are saying is that, they are distancing themselves and so on and so forth. They don't respond, particularly on the minutes, whether that is correct or not. Besides them saying that this thing has been blown out of proportion. So it's one area that we are going to raise. But the second question is that what makes them to say that there will be a need to use the state security agencies to make sure that there's no leakage of board meeting, minutes of the board will not be printed and so on and so forth. They must know that a public broadcaster is a public broadcaster is an institution owned by the public, and it cannot be therefore privatized in one way or the other. So we have a concern around that. But thirdly, we have to sharply raise that this is the second time that newspapers write things that they don't follow up. For example, if you recall in the past, there was news that were brought up that the SABC staff won't be paid, and there was no backup of such news. And we are worried if there will be fake news that are going to the general in the press without accountability. So it also raises eyebrows because we are of the view that SOEs must be defended, must remain public institutions, and this thing of discrediting SOEs such as SABC ultimately to privatize a large portion of it so that it goes to individual pocket. It's a serious concern to us as a trade union and in general to South Africans.
Just a correction on what you've said about the SABC not explicitly denying that. I'm going to read you part of the statement that was issued. It's totally false that the SABC board took a decision to spy on its staff members. That's a verbatim quote from the SABC statement released earlier on today. And it says no such decision has been taken. So perhaps what I want to go to then is you've spoken about your discomfort with the state security agency being used in any way in the SABC. How do you then balance the very correct concerns about the Labour Relations Act and privacy specifically of staff with also the SABC wanting to, in another area, as they say, protect confidential information such as these constant leaks?
Well, there's two issues that have been raised in the press, in the article itself, is that they got a hold of the SABC board meeting that reflects on a staff where we've raised the issues of labor relations, because that was a generalizing of the information being leaked by the staff of SABC. That's the first point. In that issue, SABC went further to say the institutions such as this will not be used per se to investigate the staff. I think that is clear, and we have correctly pointed out. But it does not necessarily say that they don't want to use the state security agents at all to prevent the leakage of the confidential information. Our view is that the people that are in the board, the executive of SABC, and together the people that are tasked to deal with the minutes and all of that, they sign a confidential contract with SABC. And of course, that's where matter starts at. So if you have a team of that nature that cannot be trusted in such an extent that you use security state agencies to start now to monitor people who are supposed to be keeping SABC at a safer place in terms of the confidential information, that on its own is worrisome, because a board meeting takes place where there's only board members and those who are tasked to be there. It doesn't take place in a stadium or anywhere else where people can get information. So it should be a worrying factor.
So you've spoken about the problem of fake news, one, and then what you say is a failure of media houses who report on this kind of story to follow up. Talk to us about where, if at any point, that the CWU comes in and says this is a concern that's been raised in the media, but as a union who's tasked with looking at communication workers, how do you, if in any way, follow up on these concerns that you have and take it beyond meetings with SABC management?
I think one first is that we've already proposed that we meet with the SABC this coming week to deal with that matter, so that at least we get to the feel and the background of the entire story around that particular issue. But secondly, I think it's our responsibility, it's a challenge that has been posed now, to say when such reports are made, particularly at the level of journalists, we have to protect journalism. We have to protect that profession as one of the profession that should be reliable and be trusted by the nation at large. So we'll have to also follow up with the very same newspaper that have been flashed this news, if they did not give us sufficient evidence to back up their story. Because what troubles us is that when we begin to have fake news being publicized everywhere else, and all of us are starting to follow fake news, and at the end of the day, we found out that it was not true, and those journalists are not held accountable, it will be a troubling point. But at this particular point in time, we'd like to focus on this, what has been said and what has been published so far in as far as the matter of SABC is concerned.
Okay, staying with the SABC, there's been a concern raised, obviously, about possible editorial interference. The SABC has come out and said that's not the case. They're not going to be spying on workers. Media Monitoring Africa earlier on saying that they haven't also seen this kind of interference. As a union that's obviously been involved in the SABC or looking over affairs in the SABC, how would you characterize the state of that removal of editorial interference from government members, from the executive and members of the board, perhaps over the last 5 to 10 years until now?
Well, it's for over some time now, it's been somehow obvious that there's been some interference at the SABC at editorial level, not only by the state, but obviously from various other sectors of the society that are trying to influence the editorial of SABC to a particular agenda. So that is a concern to all of us. Hence now we are raising a flag. If SABC wants to use the state security agencies to monitor if there's a leakage of any information that comes from their own board meetings, it means that it will be much easier for any agents of the state to come into SABC because they will be given an access to a level of editorial level. So that poses a danger. That's why it's important for us to have that particular meeting, to engage further around that particular, so that we protect SABC at all costs.
Aubrey Tshabalala, spokesperson of the Communication Workers Union, thanks so much for your time.